What's up guys, this is Nathan, ThatAlbumReviewerGuy, and I'm here with another episode of my series Review Roundup. For those of you who are unfamiliar with this series, it features me giving my thoughts on albums that came out during the last 3 months that I wasn't able to make their own full-fledged review videos for. I'll be doing these in order of release date. So with all that out of the way, let's get on with this past quarter's review roundup.
These times won't change me now. No, these times won't change me now. Change me now.
We're kicking things off with What's It Like Over There, the third album from English indie rock band Circa Weyes. This will start a trend for this episode, with that trend being these are all my first full album exposures to all the bands and artists I'll be talking about today. I discovered this group on Spotify by stumbling upon the track Times Won't Change Me off this album, and I thought it had a nice groovy rhythm to it, and I liked the piano on that song. I figured I'd give the whole album a shot. The things I just said about Times Won't Change Me carry over through several other tracks as well, like the soft and heartfelt The Way We Say Goodbye, and the also catchy and upbeat Passport. These guys know what they're doing with their rhythms and piano. There's also a bit of decent synth work and some nice guitar riffs and bass support on this album as well. Nothing on here is bad, but I can't think of anything really spectacular about this disc either. It just feels like it's there, and it doesn't give me much of a reason to care about it. That being said, Circa Weyes have the tools to make something great, and maybe they have. I may need to dig into their back catalog, but this album is just okay for me. Overall, I give What's It Like Over There a 6 out of 10. It has a lot of solid instrumental moments and some catchy hooks, but it just doesn't have a wow factor for me. I learned about this album from watching ARTV's most recent Rapid Reviews video, and he enjoyed the album, so I figured I'd give it a shot. I will say this, there's a lot of cool instrumentation on this release, from the piano to the percussion to the strings. It all just helps set the mood. It gives off a variety of emotions. There are haunting tracks like Movies, and there are more relaxed songs like Andromeda, which gives off a little bit of a summer vibe to it. The soft vocal style is also something that I enjoy on here. Regardless of what tone the music is going for, the voice always seems to fit it. I think this album serves for great relaxing nighttime music. I'm someone who likes to lay in bed and listen to music, and this is great music for that. It's great to listen to something that's very atmospheric just to unwind. However, onto the negatives I found with this record, the album feels like it drags a bit, and there are some duller moments and a couple of tracks that just don't really click with me. But overall, this is a solid disc. Overall, I give Titanic Rising a 7.5 out of 10. It took a few listens for this album to grow on me, and while I don't think it's absolutely fantastic, I'm glad I gave it a shot. This one was a bit of a surprise because it was originally thought to be the third in a trilogy of EPs, but it instead turned out to be the sophomore album from Manhattan pop rock and alternative rock band Dreamers. This same thing happened with 9 Inch Nails too last year when their album Bad Witch came out, and it was originally thought to be the third in a trilogy of EPs. Anyway, I've come to enjoy Dreamers' style of music, and I think they blend pop and rock together very well. This album has a lot of good synth work and some cool bass and guitar parts. I'm also a fan of Nick Wold's voice, and it sounds really good here. There are some effects placed on it throughout the record, and it's not always for the better, but it's still a solid vocal performance overall. This album has energetic songs like Dizzy and Celebrate, but also slows things down with songs like the somber and slightly brooding Insomniac and the synth-heavy closing track Take Me Home. There's a bit of dullness here and there, and songs like Celebrate and Listen Out Loud are a little bland and cheesy in my opinion. They're not my favorites, but this album has enough good material on it to get a pass from me. Overall, I give Launch, Fly, Land a 7 out of 10. Not really an album of the year contender, but I think this album is solid enough. I also think Dreamers are a bit underrated, so if you haven't checked them out, please go do so. I'm hoping for a lot of great things from the band in the future. This is the first of 2 albums I'll be talking about today that I decided to check out mostly because I like the band name. I don't know too much about this Australian group except for the fact that they've been around for a little while and they're extremely ambitious. For example, they released 5 albums in 2017. That's insane. Not Buckethead levels of insane, but that's a different animal altogether. Anyway, I was intrigued about this album after hearing the catchy and mellow lead single, which is the title track. It's honestly one of the most interesting songs I've heard so far this year, and that's only the first track on the album. There are 8 more, and they all have something that makes them interesting. There's a lot of classic blues rock influence on this album, with the style of guitar playing and harmonica parts in the songs. It's cool to hear this kind of style. It gives me ZZ Top vibes in spots. This album's also pretty progressive. While it does have that blues rock tone for most of it, it starts to go more into an electronic atmosphere toward the end of it. It's a nice shift, and it makes for an overall intriguing listening experience. I love both vocalists, I love all the instruments being used here, and I really like the flow and progression of the album, just like I mentioned. I'm not sure if I'd call this disc a masterpiece or anything like that, but it is very good. Overall, I give Fishing for Fishies an 8 out of 10. This is a very interesting album, and I think I'll keep my eyes open for this band from now on.
Show me the skeletons in your closet. Don't wanna play pretend.
For those of you who aren't familiar with this band, New Year's Day are a modern gothic rock / post-hardcore band from Anaheim, California. I heard their song Defame Me a few years back, and that's how I was introduced to them. Their music falls under the category of that edgy rock or metal music that appeals to a younger audience, mainly teenagers. I'm not saying that older people can enjoy it, but that's just what it comes off as to me. This album has a lot of songs about being an outcast or breaking free from your chains and stuff like that. While older people deal with these issues, it's much more common to hear about them from a younger perspective. The subject matter just feels very generic to me, as does the musical composition. This album is bland and formulaic with a few standout moments here and there. The guitar work is solid, and I've always liked Ash Costello's voice. Songs like Skeletons and Poltergeist showcase the band's talents very well, but for the most part, this album just feels run-of-the-mill. It's not that exciting, and I honestly feel like it tries just a little too hard to be edgy from time to time. Overall, I give Unbreakable a 4 out of 10. I'm personally not impressed with this release, but if you are, regardless of your demographic, that's great. I'm glad you can find enjoyment in something I can't. Despite how long Amon Amarth have been around, not only have I never heard an album of theirs, but I've never even heard a single song. Obviously, I'm a novice when it comes to this band, so feel free to take my opinion with a grain of salt. I will say I like the fact that they reference Viking culture in their music. Even though I've heard that they don't like being called a Viking metal band, their material and aesthetic speaks for itself. I'm not the biggest death metal fan, even on the melodic side, but I think Johann's vocal performance here is solid. There are times where his range comes off as very monotone and I kinda just tune him out, but that's not always the case. However, I think the instrumentation is where the album really shines. I love the atmosphere the band creates with the instruments. It makes you feel like you're ready to go into battle or pillage villages or do other things that Vikings do. The drums are pounding, the guitars are crushing, everything feels so heavy and powerful. My biggest issue with the album though is the fact that it doesn't leave a lasting impression on me. Songs blend into one another and nothing really stands out. That being said, I still think the album is solid for what it is. Overall, I give Berserker a 7 out of 10. This wasn't a bad introduction to Amon Amarth. If you're looking to get into them, maybe give this album a shot. Remember how I said there were 2 albums I listened to because I liked the band name? Well, this is the second one. This is a pop punk and surf punk album that starts off and ends pretty strong, but there's not a lot of substance in between. I like the light and fun guitar riffs and drums, as well as the catchy melodies and hooks. There are a couple of fun songs on here like Hologram, New World, and The Problem, as well as a couple of slightly slower tracks like Miles and Miles. I enjoy those songs a bit, but I can't fully grasp onto this album. It's like a cheese sandwich. I like it fine and it'll suffice for a while, but I need some meat on it to fully flesh it out, pun intended. They rely too much on the same trick in my opinion. This fun summer type sound works for a bit, but it does come across as a little stale after a while. Overall, I give this Mess is a Place a 6 out of 10. This album's not bad by any means, and there are enjoyable qualities and even songs on it, but I feel like it's lacking true substance. Maybe next time try putting a little ham on the cheese sandwich. Motionless in White is a band that I could never get into, but I decided to check out their new album since I've never heard one of their albums in full and give them a fair shot. After listening to Disguise, I can say that I still think Motionless in White are one of the most obvious examples of a style over substance band that I can think of. They always try this scary, spooky, gloomy, dark, maybe sometimes Halloween themed sound, and I get that that's their shtick, but it never feels new. I may not have heard a full album from the band before this one, but I've heard more than enough of their music to make a judgment on them. This album just feels so bland and boring. It has a couple of decent songs like the title track and Code, but most of the album is boring, and what isn't boring is bad. The generic metalcore tracks, the very bad attempts at nu metal, the boring paint-by-numbers radio single, it's all here. The album starts out okay, but as it progresses, I feel like they started to put less and less effort into the music. The band does the same thing over and over, and as I've said before, that can work for some bands, but for me, it doesn't work here. I'm also not the biggest fan of Chris Motionless's vocals. To me, he sounds like an emo, scene version of Marilyn Manson. His performance is passable on some tracks, but on others, it's just grating. Overall, I give Disguise a 3 out of 10. If you like Motionless in White, and I know a lot of people do, go ahead and like them. I'm just gonna stay away from them. I don't think I'll be covering these guys again anytime soon. Well folks, this is probably going to be as close to a new Jane's Addiction album as we're going to get for a while. I say that, and yet Perry Farrell's solo work sounds nothing like Jane's Addiction. I might be able to picture a song like Red, White, and Blue Cheerfulness on the Jane's Addiction album, but for the most part, this is pretty different. It definitely has its rock roots, but there are a lot of electronic elements thrown in, some classical elements, and a couple other twists and turns. A couple tracks give off a little bit of a Middle Eastern vibe, for example. Perry's voice sounds great here. The man is 60 years old, but he still sounds pretty good even in his higher register. The female vocals are a nice assist as well. There are some effects placed on the vocals throughout the album that I'm not all too keen on, but it's still a solid performance overall. Instrumentally, the record's a bit choppy. Some of the instruments get lost in the production, and I feel like that takes away from the music in some spots. This album is a bit messy and inconsistent, but I still think it's a fairly enjoyable listen. It's definitely more on the experimental side of music, at least the way I see it, so it may not be for everyone, but I think this is a solid release. Overall, I give Kind Heaven a 7 out of 10. Not bad, Perry. Now we just need you to get back in the studio with Dave and the boys and give us another Jane's Addiction album. We have one more album to discuss today, and this one I came across in a suggested YouTube video. I like the stoner rock sound of the lead single Sleep, and I dug a bit more into research on this band. Stonefield is an Australian rock band that is comprised of 4 sisters. I also learned that this album was actually produced by another Australian band, one we just talked about earlier in this video actually, that being King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Both bands will be on a North American tour together this fall, by the way, but back to the matter at hand, I mentioned that the lead single had a stoner rock sound to it. The whole album isn't like that. Some tracks go in a more progressive direction, some go in a psychedelic direction, and there are also some more synth rock leaning tracks on the album, like Route 29 and 66. The latter of which gives off some Daft Punk vibes. I like the instrumentation on this album. The vocals sound a little monotone to me, not completely, but I'm not fully connecting with the voice. I also feel like the album somehow drags despite it only being 33 minutes long. There are still some cool songs on here and I think it's a decent album all things considered. Overall, I give Bent a 6 out of 10. I might give this band a little more attention and potentially check out their back catalog. They have some unique qualities that I like. Thank you guys for watching this review roundup. I try to do these roughly every 3 months, but I do full-fledged album reviews more frequently, of course. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you think about any of these albums. You can follow me on my social media links in the description, and check out some more videos in the gimmick on screen. I'll see you all next time.